everyone, this is the Inside Liverpool Sport podcast, episode 2 for us. I'm joined today by Kieran Hamilton, Stephen Hidley, Tom Morley, Marty McCowie and George Martin, as well as myself, Sam Milne, to first of all react to the news of Gérard Houlier's death at the age of 73. He'd just been made director of Lyon's women's team, director of football, and Lyon are the best women's football team in the world at the moment. He was also a teacher originally, and he came to Liverpool and watched Liverpool beat Dundalk 10-0 in 1969, and he was an integral part to setting up French football to have their era of dominance in the early 2000s and the late 90s. So we're going to start with Marty. He had a good record against your team, Man United. How do you remember him?
Yeah, mine Houllier, when he came in to Liverpool, he was very strict straight away, had his plan set out. I made him get rid of the Spice Boys term Liverpool had at that stage and was selling like that ex-Man U player Paul Ince, and brought in Hippier and on show and stuff. But I mind clearly when I was like 12, the 03 League Cup final. Mine Gerrard scored long range, hit Beckham, beat Barthez, and then the second half, Michael Owen scored for a bad pass from Silvestre, and Didi Hamann capitalised. But always mind tough games. Mind Danny Murphy beat us as well when Houllier was there. Houllier definitely made Liverpool a better force anyway in the league and the cups during his time there.
Yeah, and then George, he started off, obviously, he came in as co-manager with Roy Evans, which is unusual, and that didn't really work out. Do we know why?
It was they kind of both had different philosophies. So Roy Evans, I'd say, was a little bit more old school. The way when Houllier come in, he had his own philosophy. He had a new way of thinking, which kind of was the reason for the change in French football. Because as he come over, he kind of brought his own tactics, and it kind of didn't work.
Yeah, and then Tom, he also made some interesting signings, some better than others.
I mean, if Simon likes a Heskey who scored a lot of goals in terms of the side as well. It obviously brought in Hamann, Hippier, who both won like competitions there, like the Champions League, the League Cup, and so forth. But so I think his signings can't really be knocked when a few of them had great success at the side as well. And obviously, he sold a lot of key players like Ince, McMahon, McAteer. Obviously, let McMahon go on, out on a free. So I don't think you can really judge these signings so much, considering the success that they had at the club.
Yeah, and then obviously the early signings included people like Cinema Pongolle as well, and it was apparently the next Zidane. Didn't work out. And there were a few of those early French World Cup players that Houllier predicted to be the next big thing, but they never were in the end. And he sort of ended up sticking with the scout score. We had Gerrard, Carragher, McManaman, Owen, Fowler, all in the team at once at one time. Danny Murphy as well. And then we won the UEFA Cup, the League Cup and the FA Cup in 2001, which George is going to talk a bit about.
Yeah, so obviously that was his main success at Liverpool and what he's most famous for doing the treble. Of course, Man United fans like Marty would make our treble, but it's still three trophies in one season. And can also remember the most famous was the League Cup, was the Michael Owen final against Arsenal in 2001, where we was getting beat 1-0 and Arsenal had a very good side, and Michael Owen come on and scored 2 in that game.
Yeah, and then he had the heart attack in a game against Leeds at half-time, and when he was rushed to the Royal in Liverpool. And the game when he came back was described by some as like the most emotional game at Anfield in a long time. Anthony McAvoy has written about it for Inside Liverpool Sport. How do you think he was loved by the fans? Because I think he loved the city, having come to Liverpool before he became a football manager, and he obviously liked it enough to come back.
Yeah, he had a very good connection with the city, which only made the fans love him more. So when he left in 2004 and when Rafa came in, you could see people were still shocked by it because of how much they actually loved him.
Yeah,
And oh, go on, carry on.
yeah, and then we're just going to go on to someone who Steven Gerrard talks highly about. Tom wants to mention that.
Well, it's like in his book, obviously, he mentions Houllier as like a father figure compared to like the man who came in afterwards.
Rafa.
Benitez, yeah, obviously, he compares him as quite a cold person. So I think Houllier had a massive, massive impact on his career. Obviously, he made him the player that he turned out to actually be, and it's obviously like he's one of the best players to ever put on the shirt. So I think that's something that is going to stick out massively in the minds of the fans of the club itself.
Yeah, I think ex-players always talk quite warmly about Houllier, and it's because even though he could be stern at times, he was someone who brought through youth players and acted, as you said, like that father figure, whereas Benitez was quite cold in some ways and was very much a sort of tactician. The other big news this morning from Liverpool FC's point of view was the Champions League draw. They have drawn RB Leipzig, the second leg to be played at Anfield at the start of March. We'll go to Marty on this because his side, Man United, have effectively got knocked out by RB Leipzig in the last group game last week.
Yeah, we're going to Leipzig there on Tuesday, and we needed a point to qualify. And I actually thought myself personally that we would get a point, no problem, with Leipzig missing their key defender, Meccano. But Leipzig made a brilliant start. Zabitzer and Forsberg in midfield, their passing range was unbelievable. They caught out Wan-Bissaka so many times, and then ended up taking a big lead. And we could have come back at the end, but Leipzig look a really good threat. They're lying second or third in the Bundesliga, 1 point behind Bayer Leverkusen, and although they've conceded 2 goals a game average in the Champions League, their Bundesliga defense is the best in the league. And both teams are very attacking, and it shows when the left back Angelino on loan from Man City, it plays at Leipzig, as the fans have described him as the best player this season, and as also their top goal scorer. Was very good against Manchester United, unfortunately. Liverpool and Leipzig, 2 very attacking teams for me, and it'll come down to who's the better defence on the day.
We'll go to George next on the reaction to getting Leipzig in the Champions League.
Yeah, I think the game is going to be a very attacking game, because if we have a look, just in December, Leipzig have conceded 10 goals. So that's only 4 games, but they've actually not lost any of these games. So they've conceded 2 against Manchester United, but they've also conceded, which they won 3-2, and I know they conceded 3 against Bayern Munich, but they drew 3-3. So it shows they're very, very good attacking side, but Liverpool will be able to score goals against them, I think. So it could come down to who's going to outscore the other.
Yeah, and Kieran, a lot of people will be happy with the Leipzig draw. It could have gone worse. We could have had Atletico Madrid, who knocked us out last year. But it wasn't the easiest draw, to say the least. Leipzig are second, just behind Bayern Munich at the moment, and drew 3-3 with the league leaders last week. Would you have preferred someone like Gladbach, Lazio or Porto?
Oh, definitely. Leipzig's a very good side. I think in the first leg against PSG, they won 1-0, was it? It's a very, very good side, and I'm not exactly over the moon about playing them, especially with, the fact we haven't got our full defence as we'd want. So yeah, I definitely would have preferred to have maybe like a Porto. I don't see Porto as a team that can really do much against our side. I think we're too dominant in the midfield. And as George said, we're an attacking threat. You know what I mean? So yeah, I would have definitely preferred the side like Porto, so maybe a little bit of an easier game. But yeah, I will take Leipzig, even though it is a bit of a difficult game.
Well, going on to Everton next day, got a 1-0 win against Chelsea at the weekend. And it was surprising, to be honest, because we thought, I know some Chelsea fans were very optimistic about going to Goodison and getting a win. We'll go to Stephen on this one. Do you think that we saw something different from Everton this weekend? Something more stern at the back because they've conceded 18 goals already this season. To keep a clean sheet against Chelsea is no mean feat.
Yeah, well, one of the fixtures I look forward to the most outside the Liverpool fixtures is actually Everton v Chelsea. But at Goodison, I think Everton are at their strongest, like most teams at home. But I do think at Goodison they're really hard to break down, and I think Chelsea know that more than most other teams. So because I don't think Chelsea have won there since 2017, which if I had to put money on it, I wouldn't put money on a Chelsea win. That's for sure.
Yeah, we'll go to Tom on Everton's defence next.
I mean, obviously, it's no mean feat having a clean sheet against that attacking Chelsea. Like, obviously, you've got Werner, who's an outstanding striker. You've got Havertz, who's an outstanding player as well, as he's proven in the last few years for Bayer Leverkusen. Obviously, Everton haven't kept a clean sheet in 3 months, I think it was, before this game. So I think that there'll be a lot of confidence in that back four now, having kept a clean sheet like against that Chelsea side that's got so much firepower. Obviously, there were talk earlier in the season about potentially like a title charge from Everton. I still think that's going to be a long way off with that back four they've got. But I think it's definitely something now they can build on, and hopefully, in terms of them, get into the Europa League places maybe. And we'll have to see, but it is a massive result, is that, against Chelsea? A massive result.
Yeah, Marty, I know you watched the game as more of a neutral from your point of view. Did you think Everton were good enough to show themselves as title challengers or not?
Before the game, personally, I thought Chelsea would definitely get a result with the two fullbacks, Coleman and Digny, still out, and then James Rodriguez and Fabian Delph also injured. But the return of Gylfi Sigurdsson in the midfield definitely showed his creativity, and have scored the winning penalty, of course, as well. But a word that they mentioned about Jordan Pickford, who's come under a lot of criticism the last few months, but he made some wonderful saves later on in the second half and a couple in the first. So Everton definitely, with that 4 centre backs they played basically at the back, Ancelotti, Godfrey, Keane were brilliant. And so Everton definitely, if they keep Calvert-Lewin fit and keep the creativity in midfield, definitely look a dangerous threat for a European place.
Yeah, and George, on Pickford, he played well at the weekend, but he does seem very erratic at times.
Yeah, he is very erratic. If we look at the tackle he done on Virgil van Dijk, that's one. But if we just on the game, you can see his good sides, but you can also see his bad sides. So he was basically got the assist for Everton's goal. He's hoofed up the ball, and he's got a quite good passing range, and he's found Calvert-Lewin, who's beat Thiago Silva in the air and then got to the ball in front of Edouard Mendy, who's brought him down. But Pickford, if we look at the chances Chelsea had, so they hit the post twice, the Mason Mount free kick. He when the camera went to him, you kind of looked at him and he kind of knew. He took a step to his right, which kind of gave Mount the space to whip the free kick, which hit the post, so he kind of got away with it.
Yeah, we'll go one question for Stephen. If you had to pick a position to sign a player for Everton in January, which position would it be and why?
I probably would choose a centre half. I know we mentioned before about them defensively, but I do think they signed Godfrey, but I also think they need an established centre half, someone who's experienced. I think that's where Chelsea went right, getting Thiago Silva. Just bring that experience in, strengthen that back four, and it'll persevere in the bigger games.
Yeah, so that's all we've got on Everton today. We'll go to what happened at 4:30 yesterday at Craven Cottage. Liverpool drew 1-1 with Fulham. And whilst the Reds got better in the second half, the first half was very much Fulham dominated. And Tom, why do you think that was? Did you watch the game?
I think the issue at the minute is obviously it's the whole congestion of the season. It's just not helping anybody at all. We've seen so many sides have loads of injuries. Obviously now that spine on the side that won the title last year, it's not all there. Obviously you've got Van Dijk out, Gomez out. Alisson's coming back from injury just now, his first game yesterday in a while. I think it's had such a big effect on the season. And I think like a lot of sides now are starting to actually tire who are playing in Europe. And like at the minute it's such an open league. Like I think anyone from 15th to first is beating each other. I mean, I think at the bottom, obviously, it's a smaller league. I just think there's a lot of things which are not right with the season in terms of fixtures, TV times. It's having a massive effect. I think it did play into the hands of, obviously, thing yesterday, the Fulham side yesterday. So I think that's why, personally.
Tom mentioned injuries for Liverpool. There was another 3 announced in the last few days. Tsimikas, Liverpool's backup left back who signed in the summer, is out 6 to 8 weeks. Throughout his entire career, he hasn't been out through injury hardly, and then he comes to Liverpool and he's missed plenty of games already, shall we say. Jota is Liverpool's star signing of the summer. Now Thiago's not hardly played. He's out for 6 to 8 weeks. He doesn't require surgery though. And then also Matip had to go off at half time. Do you think the congestion is playing having a factor or not? Because Jota's injury was an impact injury.
I do, yeah. I think I just I don't know what, to be honest with you, right? I think this whole injury thing. If we remember a couple of weeks ago, Klopp had that the big row with the reporter, and I think what he said was right. The whole thing around how much we are playing is resulting in a lot of our players, receiving these injuries and whatnot, and leaving us in a very, very vulnerable position. And we're coming up against these teams like Fulham. It seems we should really be getting the full 3 points from, but we really can't help the fact that we're losing these key players, and even backup players. So I just think there's something now needs to be really done. Maybe a few signings in January, but yeah, it's just not really ideal for us if we want to get back to the first position in the league, and if we want to continue our Champions League hopes.
Yeah, it's definitely a game that we probably would have won last year. George, do you have anything to comment on the match yesterday?
Yeah, I think the first half we were just too slow out the blocks, and I don't think the team kind of had that click to it. So because if you watch after their goal, we kind of see Klopp's reaction, and you can tell he's shouting at the players to wake up. So I think the players were kind of getting used to other players playing in different positions. And obviously, we've been relying on Jota quite a lot at the minute, because I don't think Mane is quite in as good as form as he's been in. And Salah hasn't been as influential. So Jota has been that main man, and missing him, I think they kind of miss someone to rely on to get the ball and just drag the team forward.
Yeah, so 1-1 result yesterday for Liverpool. Could have been worse, as many of the other sides near the top of the league also drew. Next, we're going to go to Stephen and George to talk about Canelo against Smith at the weekend in the boxing.
Yeah, so it's one of the most biggest high-profile fights of the year, really. Super middleweight clash between one of the pound-for-pound best current boxers in the world, and you've got Callum Smith, who's the WBA and Ring Magazine super middleweight champion. So at the end, announced the other day, the WBC belt is on the line, and I think that's only fitting for such a big clash between these two middleweight giants. And I think Canelo fought Callum's brother Liam Smith in 2016, where Canelo won by stoppage, and I think Callum may want to seek a vengeance for his brother's loss.
George, do you think Callum Smith from Liverpool can win?
Yeah, I don't see why not. He's currently unbeaten. Obviously, Canelo's a lot more experienced, but it's going to be a hard fight, of course, because Canelo, as we know, is just one of the best fighters, and he's known for them big punches. Of course, Canelo did beat Liam Smith a few years ago, and that also took Liam Smith's unbeaten record. So hopefully, Canelo can't take Callum Smith's record as well.
Yeah, we'll go to Kieran for a comment as well now.
Smith is 27-0. That's a real challenger, for Canelo. he was also ranked #1 by the Ring magazine. So I think people are really underestimating what Smith can do. And I do think he will be a very good challenge for Canelo. And as Joe said, he has got that kind of personal agenda because of Canelo beating his brother. So I do think that he's got a real good chance in winning the fight, Smith against Canelo.
Anything to round up on the boxing with, Stephen?
Yeah, as George was saying there about the chances Callum Smith has, I think Canelo's weight will play a part. The way he's up and down the weights as if it's nothing. I think that will play a part. As we all know, Callum Smith is he's so huge for this weight, and I think that will play a huge part in the fight.
So next we're going to go to Marty quickly to mention the return of wrestling on Merseyside, another fighting sport.
Yeah, great news in the past few days from the wrestling scene in Merseyside. Fighting Spirit Pro Wrestling Training School based in Maghull reopened this past week. They're open 3 times a week. They start their training for beginners, intermediates and professionals. The training school are looking to see a rise in participation as their head coaches James Drake and Zach Gibson, who's from Liverpool himself, have returned to American TV on NXT and are challenging for the tag team titles. So the head trainers are definitely getting a lot of publicity at the minute. So hopefully that'll shine on the wrestling school in Liverpool. And other news as well, the wrestling promotion TNT Extreme Wrestling, who are based out of Liverpool and have their events out of Hangar 34, have announced their schedule for 2021, opening with Merseyside Massacre at the end of January. And they've announced yesterday a women's title match, which will be defended at the show with Liverpudlian Liverbird Lizzie Evo defending her TNT Women's Championship against Alexis Falcon, which will be the headline of the show. And tickets are available now and limited spaces due to COVID.
Yeah, just a little bit on the fighting Spirit Pro Wrestling. I actually spoke to a trainee from there called James Wright, and he's 18 and he's from Huyton. And he was just saying about how he's so excited to get back into his training regime. He used to do 3 hours a day, 3 times a week. And yeah, he was very positive about coming back to the whole wrestling scene and getting back into it. And he actually believes that there's a lot of opportunities that can be created from COVID, because a lot of cards need filling up as some people can't travel from different countries and different areas. So it's very good to see it back. I'm very excited to see what happens.
Yeah, and for James Wright, the wrestler, he talked about how hard training has been with gyms closed and boxing gyms closed, wrestling gyms closed. George spoke to Owen Quirk, a personal trainer at the gym in Liverpool, and he was talking about how gyms have been closed and how difficult it is for people to train.
From the outside looking in, you think that the gyms were a bit unsafe. Obviously, when you think about it, you think people sweating, people exercising, people breathing all the time. But if you look at the figures and stuff, it was next to nil. I think since they reopened again after the first lockdown, I think it was 300,000 people in the gym. I think 78 were confirmed to have cases. So it was pretty baffling why they closed them in the first place, to be fair.
Yeah, he spoke about, of course, in the first lockdown, he was able to do one-to-one with people outside. But with the weather, it was a lot more easier, a lot more engaging. But with the second lockdown, he said it was really hard because people had less motivation to go out and train when it was raining, it was colder. So he kind of said it had a massive effect the second lockdown, even though it was a lot shorter compared to the first one.
Yeah, and I spoke to, inside Liverpool Sport, I spoke to Councillor James Roberts, who is chair of Liverpool's Active Travel Forum, about the increase in bike use in the city over the course of the pandemic.
When lockdown started back in March, we saw a significant drop in the amount of vehicular traffic. You know, we saw people stop using their private motor cars, even public transport took a big hit. So one of the things we also saw was a massive increase in the number of people and the demand for people to go cycling. I certainly saw it outside my door every day. We saw, many, many more people cycling. So the pop-up cycle lanes ties into that, and it was about it being it was put forward as a temporary measure, although my intention, and certainly the intention of a number of my colleagues, is to make sure that now that they're in.
And yeah, we heard Councillor Roberts there talking about cycling in the city and the pop-up cycle lanes. Obviously, the pop-up cycle lanes are something that have encouraged more people to go cycling. 222% is the increase seen in cycling in the city. Stephen, did you get out much on the bike or go running, like in lockdown, because the gyms were shut?
Yeah, well, before lockdown, I was always in the gym. So obviously, when lockdown hit, gyms were closed. It was tough to take, but I think I just made a little pact to myself and just said, can't be sitting around during lockdown. You got to get out, and didn't do much cycling, but I done a lot of running. I was running about 12 miles a week, and it just keeps the brain in check, keeps it ticking, and it really helps with your mental health and not sitting around all day doing nothing.
Yeah, and George, Stephen mentioned mental health. You spoke to Patrick Kirby, a student psychologist at John Moores, about the effects of exercise on mental health.
Yeah, so he spoke, and he spoke about how important it is for, even if it was just that 1 hour of exercise, which of course the government did talk a lot about in the first lockdown, saying we needed that 1 hour of exercise. And he spoke about his own personal view, and he said that how important it was for him and for his mental health, because it was just kind of that difference of being stuck in the house and you were seeing different scenery.
Kieran, you mentioned on the podcast last week about how getting out has affected your mental health. Can you comment on that again?
I'm a avid gym goer. I usually go 5 times a week, and it's like you kind of release. You've got an hour or two just to be with yourself, and if you've had an hard day, you just release your stress and whatnot. So yeah, obviously not being able to do that for such a long period of time really affected me. It made me feel a bit low. Made you feel a bit unenergetic and not really want to do nothing. But then you do things like home workouts and stuff, and you kind of get back into the routine. But it's nowhere near the same as what it feels like going to a gym itself.
And Tom, what's been your experience over lockdown with exercise?
It was mainly just runs and stuff, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm not that much of a gym goer anyway, to be honest with you. So the gym closing didn't really affect me, but I know from my parents, for example, are massive gym goers. And I know it affected them massively. Like, there were just loads of home workouts, loads of like exercise, like the home workout clips that you've got and stuff like that. There were loads of them on in the house all the time. So it did sort of motivate me a little bit to try and exercise more and get more fit. But I mean, the gym's closing didn't really have that much of an issue for me personally. But,
Yeah. And it's also the sport clubs being shut, football, women's hockey, etc. The list goes on. In a poll we conducted for Inside Liverpool Sport, 11.5% and a combination 35.6%, which adds up to nearly 50%, said the social aspect of attending sports clubs was one of the reasons that they do physical exercise. And without that, the lack of social interaction, I suppose, would also impact on people's mental health. It's a conversation that needs to carry on amongst men and women, and it needs talked about. So we've all heard about the ferry across the Mersey, but how about swimming it? Anthony McAvoy's interviewing open water swimmer Craig Robertson about his plans to swim across the River Mersey for charity in 2021. Look out for that story on Inside Liverpool Sport today. We've got other stories going up. We've got a piece from Anthony as well about Gérard Houllier, and I believe we've got a wrestling piece going up. So thanks for listening, everyone, and I hope you can join us again at some point.